So we are extremely delighted and happy to have Aakar Patel, one of the distinguished writers, political commentator and human rights activist with Malabar Journal. Welcome, Aakar.
Thank you for having me, 𝗧𝗵𝗲.
So we will begin with your book, The Price of Modi Years. So my first question would be, whether is it time, because you wrote the book when the Modi regime was 70 years old. Now he is going to complete almost a decade as the Prime Minister of India. And do you think that the time is ready for a sequel to the book? I mean, do you think that there is any possibility of having a relook at what you have written in the book?
There's two things. One is that there will be a new edition coming out in September. We are talking right now in July in 2023.
Yeah.
And I will update some of the data.
Okay.
But the real question is whether Mr. Modi will come back in 2024 and then there will be the need to write a 15-year history of his time.
Yeah.
It is possible. I hope it doesn't happen. But I think it's entirely in the realm of possibility that the BJP will come back to power next year, and that India will need to summarize what it is that has been its damage, what's been the positives in terms of the last 15 years, and somebody has to make their report card. It could be me. I don't think it will be. I think I'm done with this phase of my writing. But I do think that if Mr. Modi does come back in 2024, which is 8-9 months from now, there will be the need to summarize again what it is that he's done on the side of the economy, the social fabric, and the rest of it.
See, the book, you have mentioned some 52 or 53 benchmarks, that is globally recognized benchmarks, and out of that, almost, I think in 49 of them, the government, the Modi regime was a failure. And only 2 or 3 where he has succeeded, and that too also a continuation of the earlier projects. But despite such a failure, what is the reason for the kind of, he happens to be the most popular politician in this country.
He's very charismatic, and I think in our part of the world, charisma is important. That whether the charisma is that of the saint like Gandhi, or the charisma is that of the clown like Lalu Prasad Yadav, or the charisma is that of the macho hero like Rajnikant or Mr. Modi. We do have this attraction to the person, particularly male, who is seen as being very different from the others through his personality. Does it help the polity? I would say no. That charismatic individuals tend to be focused on themselves rather than on society, and I would include Gandhi in that. And I think that it's for mature societies to recognize that the report card that somebody leaves behind should be based on data rather than likability.
I mean, so you would like to say that it is a kind of a long genealogy in India for this kind of a charismatic leaders to emerge?
I think so. I think that in parts of India, including the mature parts of India, the more stable parts of India, like the south of India, there has always been an attraction to the charismatic figure who has been seen as somebody who will take you out of the problems that you have in your current life and to be able to take you into another space.
The craving for some kind of a savior.
Absolutely right. I would put that in the space that I think it is, which is that there is a messianic savior-like thing about Mr. Modi, which responds to what the impulse of the people is, that we want a savior.
And that is, I mean, more than the what do you call, the general masses, I think that this craving is more pronounced in this middle class and educated class.
For you and for me, our dependence on the state is limited in to a large extent, that we don't need the state for our livelihood. We don't need the state to be able to do most of the things. But for a large part of the country, they do need the state. They do need the state to be able to get subsidized grain. They do need the state to be able to get subsidized power and so on. And the idea that there is somebody who can make that difference to their lives in the immediate sense and to the lives of their children is quite strong. And because of this, I think the messianic complex is bigger here than it would be in other democracies. And we have to live with that. I think we have to understand that this is something that is a reality. how it is to be countered is something that we need to think about.
And during the last, after 2014, there is a kind of and you have also mentioned in your book that apart from making the minorities, especially the Muslim minorities, as a kind of a second-class citizens in this country or without any entitlement per se, this present regime hasn't contributed much to the welfare or the upliftment of the people.
Well, if you look at, say, what are the measures we can examine to see whether a government has been successful or not, we can look at GDP growth.
Yeah.
So if you look at GDP growth between 2010 and 2020, it's about 5%, which it was in the decade between 1990 and 1920, and 1 point less than it was between 2000 and 2010. Yeah. So it's slightly slower than it used to be. In terms of employment, according to the government's own figures, we have higher unemployment than we've had at any point since 1971. We've had a lower labor force participation rate at any point since we've had since 1971. We have 60% of the population, 80 crore people who require, according to the government, 5 kilos of subsidized or free grain, which means that there is distress. So I'm saying that what are the elements of success? We have a smaller economy than Germany. We've got more billionaires than Germany. Why is it that India is not able to replicate South Korea and China and Japan? And why is it that we are in the same boat as Pakistan? Why is it that the economy in 2018 fell behind in per capita GDP terms from Bangladesh? These are the questions to ask. And I think that if you and I would discuss this, we would come to an agreement that this is based on government incompetence. The problem is that you and I don't represent the discourse that happens in the country, which is based around other things.
Yeah, that is what, in fact, even the recent visit made by Mr. Modi to the US, he was saying that when he came, the economy was less than $2 trillion, and now it is going to be a $5 trillion economy and kind of a thing. So how does this correlate?
Well, to look at something that grows exponentially in time, the numbers that he's spoken about make sense only if you don't understand anything about sort of economics. The question is whether, looking at India in 2023, we need to ask ourselves whether there are states that contribute meaningfully significant things to India and to the subcontinent that are not available elsewhere. As a Gujarati, would I like the Gujarat model? Would I like the Kerala model? I would prefer the Kerala model. And this is not because I'm socialist or leftist or whatever, but because I've been to this state and I've seen that it is important to get people healthy and educated above making sure that businessmen get access to capital, get access to land. And I think that the inability of North India to understand that there are parts of India that are competently running their regions, their states, that they need to learn from. I think Gujaratis need to learn from Kerala more than the other way around. That arrogance that is coming means that we will never be able to fully, till such time as we understand it, never be able to fully appreciate the quality we have in our own country. And we'll be talking about things like, I got a $2 trillion economy and I'm going to make it a $5 trillion. These numbers don't mean anything.
You mean to say that such projections are meaningless because at the ground level things are not so honky-dory? Or
well, there are two things. One is that somebody saying that my ambition is to make a $3 trillion economy into a $5 trillion. It means like a 10-year-old child saying at some point in my life my ambition is to be 13 years old. You will be 13 years old.
Okay.
That is the way that the world works.
It's a natural growth.
It's the natural progression of the world. You will grow, you will become that.
Yeah.
How many people in your country will be able to take part in that growth? How many individuals, how many women, how many children, how many weaker sections will be able to extract something of value from that growth? That is the question.
And that is something which is a fundamental issue, which is not connected with Modi alone. Even the previous regime, previous governments were also facing this kind of an issues. And this is a running theme in India's whole development discourse.
It is. There is some departure. So you would say that there are 3 or 4 phases that you can divide this country's economic progress into. You would say that at the onset, when we were just outside of independence, there was an idea that higher education and heavy industry should be the focus. That is what is called Nehruvian socialism. We'll go on dams, we'll go on IIT, IIM. Is that the right approach? I think no.
Yeah, that is what even recently Ashok Modi has flagged this
Absolutely.
issue. Yeah.
But did Nehru succeed in what he was doing?
Yeah.
That is the question. To my mind, the answer would be yes.
Yes, yeah.
Is IIT successful? Yes. Is IIM successful? Yes. Indira Gandhi did what she had to with banks and so on. Is Modi successful in what he's doing? To answer that, we have to ask, what is it that you're doing?
Okay.
Do you have an ideology which is as clear as Nehru's? Nehru could be wrong, he could be a failure and so on, and that's fine. But there is a very specific thing that he went after: heavy industry and higher education. Correct? That is the way to modernity.
Yeah.
What is Modinomics? What does it stand for? And the problem that I have looking at the doctrine, there is no written doctrine because Mr. Modi has written no book on this, is that there is no real direction.
Okay.
That the Gujarat model doesn't offer you any pathway either to success in terms of a national economy or a philosophy in terms of what it is that the nation ought to do.
And in your book also you have flagged the issue of the some kind of a characteristics of this prime minister. I mean, he is a very impulsive. He makes his decisions impulsive. There is, as you said, there is no. I mean, you can't see any thought process or a strategic vision behind such this thing. Is it true?
So he has said in an interview that he does not have the patience to read files.
Yes.
And by files would mean the government material that comes to you with the input from the lower officers to the higher officers who are arguing against one another, telling you why something is good or bad. He's saying he does not have time for this. He says that he wants issues to be summarized in 2 minutes. And then based on that 2-minute summary, he will take a decision on what to do with that. There are two problems with this. One is, let's say I am Modi and Sethuraman is the officer. I'm hostage to Sethuraman because Sethuraman is the one who will be able to concise something and give Sethuraman's input in what is important, what is not important. Because I'm not reading it, I don't know. You will determine, you will tell me what it is that it should be focused on and not. That's the first thing. The second thing is that some things require deeper reflection than just a 2-minute briefing.
Okay.
It is not easy in our part of the world, which is complex, which is riddled with factionalism in terms of not just politics, but also in terms of caste and community and region, to set aside some time to think about why it is that you should not be doing or doing something. And the third part is that Mr. Modi is famously decisive. What does decisive mean? He wants to give a decision quickly.
Yes.
But when you don't have sufficient input, when you are impatient to receive input and you want to decide, I think these three things put together are not a positive. In a leader, they tend to be net negative. And I would say that the last 9 years of India would demonstrate that this impulse of his has shown itself in ways that is quite clear.
At least two decisions stands quite stark in this, the demonetization and the shutdown.
So there's a story that the Hindustan Times reported that the national lockdown, the BBC filed more than 200 RTIs to ask which parts of government had been consulted before the national lockdown had been imposed. And the answer was zero. No ministry was actually consulted. Disaster management, finance, nobody knew that this was coming home. It was impulsive. And because of that impulsive nature, we saw what happened. Similarly, I think that what happened on the 8th of November in 2016 was in large measure not a collective decision. Ministers were told to leave their mobile phones outside the room when they came in, which means that they did not know that this decision was coming. Their ministries did not know it was coming. And this is not the way, not just democracies, but any civilized government should function, that you should prepare the state,
Yeah.
the apparatus of the state.
I mean, how this decision is going to impact on the larger people and what will be the state is going.
Sethuraman, how many women were exploited because they did not know that the money that they had in their pocket or their purse or their blouse was worth something, not worth something. They did not know, they're not literate. We don't live in a society where people are sort of automatically understanding of what the government says and does. It was a very cruel decision, and I think that a cruelty and what it resulted at the human level is something that was not documented. But I think it is something that is painful to think about, and something that this country has had to contend with and has left a very negative mark in our history.
And another very important or very discernible thing about this government during the last 9 years is that there is a systematic attempt to muscle down or crush any kind of a critical dissent, whether it is human rights, whether it is a political this thing. So how does that kind of system?
So human rights, no government in India is fond of, including in Kerala or in any other part of India, or before the BJP as well. So the Congress is also not very fond of human rights, which is a fact. But normally democracies have a progressive trend. If you look at the United States, that in the 100 years between the abolition of slavery in the 1860s and the civil rights movements in the 1960s, there is a progressive trend that goes this way. In our country, it's not necessarily that the trend is always upward. You tend to go up and down, depending, you zigzag based on what government is in power. We are right now in a term of zag, where you're not zigging upwards, you're zagging downwards. And in a lot of instances, particularly related to individual rights on either on religion or on the ability to express oneself without being jailed for a long time, we have regressed. And I think that is negative for a democracy. Democracy should show a trend which is upward.
So for instance, even during the height of emergency, someone like Snehalata Reddy was given bail because of her ill health. But in the case of 𝗧𝗵𝗲, it was not even...
I think that there are instances, and these are, to my mind, these are martyrs. This is a very Christian word, but 𝗧𝗵𝗲's death in custody, in the manner in which it happened, it represents the cruelty not just of the government but also of the state in general, and the disregard by those parts of the state that could have stopped it and checked it. Siddique Kappan's imprisonment, I think, is representative also. That, and as much for the fact that he is Muslim as he is South Indian, I think there is a contempt for this part of the country in the parts that matter electorally, which should be revised, because people should come to the South and see what it is about. To lecture the rest of South Asia and the rest of the world on what it is that good governance is, one should come and see what is happening in other parts of the country, rather than flagging off trains from North India all the time.
And also, I mean, the way this concoction of this Bhima Koregaon case, I mean, there are very credible evidence that some of these...
I wish that this case that you are speaking about were more well known amongst people who are literate and could understand that there is no connection at all between the violence that happened in Bhima Koregaon and the 16 people who were jailed. But they were jailed nonetheless. One of them died, one of them in their 80s became senile while he was in jail. Do we want to live in a country which has a government that is this hard-hearted about things that are manifestly untrue? Like, if you and I were to have a reasonable discussion about whether there is any application of law in this case, you and I would conclude that there is no application. They were not part of this. There is nothing there. Despite this, to be insisting on denying them bail, this is not about conviction. The government is not trying to convict them in a case. What it's trying to do is deny them bail.
Bail, yeah.
Which I think is a sign of how immature in many ways our democracy is and how long a way we have to go before we can actually realize the goals of the Constitution and what it aims to see.
And one of the points which you have raised in your book is that the kind of damage which is done by this regime for the polity in India may take years to recover. I mean, could you elaborate on that?
There are two things to the damage. One is at the level of society, that if I'm trying to introduce violence at the level of society, which is happening right now, I think that is relatively easily reversible. The more difficult one will be in the sense of the state, in the judiciary, academia,
The institutional
institutional infection of this kind of ideology where you believe that one part of the country is an enemy and the role of the state is to make sure that this enemy is fixed. That is very dangerous and it takes a long time to fix. And it usually takes an external agent to fix it. In Germany, it was an external agent that fixed it.
Yeah.
I hope in our case that is not the that doesn't happen. But it's hard to see what it is that will reverse this or pause this at the moment.
And here I would like to ask whether the RSS and which is the ideological mentor of Modi regime, has reached a kind of a strategic inflection point because they have played all their cards. If you look at the Ayodhya temple, Article 370, now Uniform Civil Code. So beyond this, what will they have?
I would be on your side. I would say that this is all they have. Let's hope that you and I are right and this is all they have and they don't want anything else. The problem is if introduction of divisiveness is productive in the electoral sense, they will find something else.
Okay, like that happening now in Manipur.
I genuinely think that is not a product. I hope that's not a product of their. I think that's a product of incompetence rather than being sort of deliberate. But they don't understand this country.
Okay.
The Gujaratis genuinely do not understand that Jat Punjabi farmers can sit on the road for a year. Gujaratis, it will not go through their head. And when they passed that law and these people came to Haryana, I don't think either Amit or Modi knew that they would be there for a year and force them to apologize and take the laws back.
Okay.
When the Muslim women went on to dharna in various parts of India, I don't think that the Modi cabinet knew that this would cause them to make sure that CAA was never actually implemented on the ground, and it's not been implemented. It's been 3.5 years. Yeah. Similarly, I think that one pushback that they will probably get, and my guess is it will come soon, is essentially from Tamil Nadu and Kerala, which are productive, prosperous, competently run states, which have had their taxation powers removed from them because of GST.
Yeah.
And have had this top-down imposition of a North Indian ideology, which they will resist. I'm not just talking about the non-Hindu parts of these two states. I'm talking also about the fact that, generally speaking, these states and parts of the South tend to be more progressive than the rest of us. And I'm hopeful that there will be resistance from these parts to what is happening to us in the rest of India.
And also, do you think that any possibility of this, electoral, apart from the electoral setback, a kind of a, as you mentioned about a pushback coming from South, any other kind of a...
So the thing is that because we are not a full dictatorship, we are not fully competent at running a full dictatorship, there will always be space for
some kind of a cracks.
Yes. The fact is that India cannot be a competently run dictatorship because we are not competent at doing anything.
Okay.
And because of that, even despite its relatively low population compared to the North, the South does have enormous influence in terms of its voice. It has enormous influence in terms of the output and the assets that it brings to the nation, particularly in a time of the nation's history when services is much more important than manufacturing.
Yeah.
And I think that there is no question that if the North were to try and impose something like a delimitation based on population that would take seats away
Yeah.
to the north would find meaningful resistance from the south. Rightly so. I think it is
already,
unfair.
in fact, you must have heard about it. A book has already come out by one Mr. Neelakantan, South versus North, titled The Great.
So I was reading it yesterday.
Yeah. So I mean, there is a kind of a thinking, this thing, this.
Logically, I don't see, as a North Indian, I sympathize with the South. Why should a part of India that is more competently run, that is more competent on Human Development Index, on education, on the economy, on per capita GDP, on women's participation in the labor force, on anything else, be made hostage to the fact that we have more children?
Okay.
It doesn't make sense. It's not fair. You could argue that, okay, we are more people, so we should get more power. Okay, but I'm saying that why punish the South for that?
Yeah.
There should be some compensation that the South receives for the fact that it is losing power. The Rajya Sabha is meaningless in the sense that it's not really representing states' rights.
Right.
The South will have to determine what it is that it needs to do to be able to push back against this Hindiization, Gujaratiization of the polity.
See, this present government was also known for a kind of a witch hunt against Amnesty International, which I think you were heading it at that time. What is the status of it now?
So we are operative. Our bank accounts are frozen, and we have cases against us in various places, CBI, ED, and so on. Unfortunately, on the unfreezing of the bank accounts, most of the process in the ED is internal, so we have to go through what is called the adjudicating authority of the ED.
ED, okay.
Yeah,
it's like a Khap Panchayat.
It's like a Khap Panchayat, and once we are through that, once we are finished with that comprehensively, only then do we have the right to move a writ in High Court. So we are waiting for that to end. Hopefully it will end in our favor. If it doesn't end in our favor, we'll move a writ. If it ends in our favor, we will operate our bank accounts again. But either way, my guess is that at some point in 2024, we'll be operational again in India.
So right now, all the activities of I is...
are shut in the sense that we don't have access to money. I don't have any sort of employees that I can pay, and there is no way that I can resume operations without access to the bank account.
And coming back to the speech today you have made, apart from all these issues, you have, flagged two very important issues. One is that the real issues facing this country. On one issue you have mentioned is climate change. And we are not discussing that. It's how it is going to impact the people and what is the kind of repercussions it is going to have. And would you like to speak something more about it?
There are things that you can control as a nation which are your internal polity, that nobody else is concerned with them. There are things that concern the external world.
Yeah.
If we were a small country, we would be able to get away with not being able to be influenced by the outside world. We are not a small country.
Yeah.
We are more than 1 billion people.
1 billion people.
What that means is, if the external world feels threatened by human action, by climate change, by fossil fuels, we will be forced to changing our behavior, or the world will
Force us.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm saying that we should avoid the latter situation. We should try and compel ourselves into changing what it is that we are doing before the world. India is not a powerful nation if you look at pure power.
Okay, yeah.
We are a big nation. We are not a particularly powerful nation. There are powerful nations which are wealthy. There are powerful nations that can compel us to change our behavior. We should not wait till that happens. We should make sure that we are part of that part of humanity that is looking for a positive solution towards climate change. We should try and lead that in some meaningful way. I think supporting billionaires who make their money out of coal is not a way of doing that. And that is what we are doing at the moment. Despite what we say in public, what we have done is enrich men who are making money out of petroleum and coal.
Yes.
With the two richest men in India, both of them Gujaratis. We should, as a nation, we should realize that based on honor, based on sovereignty, based on doing the right thing, both for ourselves and for humanity, we should not wait for the world to compel us into doing something that we don't want to do.
And another thing which you have mentioned that also connected with the climate change, but it also connected with the developments in technology and other things, is the kind of economic growth. The kind of economic growth which South Korea or some other similar country has achieved is no more possible because that the world has changed. Could you, I mean...
It's no more possible through the same route. So countries normally in the last 75 years, the countries that became wealthy, which were poor to begin with, were countries that went from agriculture into light manufacturing, into the assembly of small automobiles and so on, and then got into heavy industry, and then got into electronics. That route, which was followed by, say, Taiwan, followed by Japan, followed by South Korea, followed by China to a large extent, is not open anymore. And the reason it's not open anymore is that the lower part of that economic journey, which is light manufacturing and so on, textiles and so on, is closed.
Okay.
You don't need as many people to run. When I used to run a family business in Surat, this was in the late 80s, we had a factory of looms, power looms, where you had 4 looms run by one person, normally a man, usually a man. Today you have looms that run at 10 times the speed that our looms ran, with one person running 64 looms, one person running 128 looms.
Kind of an automation estate.
Absolutely. So you got much heavier output, you've got much fewer people.
Okay.
And that will continue, not just in this sector, but in all sectors. So the idea that you can replicate what was done 30 years ago doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
But if it doesn't exist anymore, what are the other routes?
Yeah,
we don't know. We have no idea. Because no other country of our size has gone through a period where it can bring 700-800 million people from poverty into middle class and then into the higher middle class without any access to work. We don't have the jobs. And I think the government's own data tells us that there are not enough jobs to be able to transition the majority of the population of India out of poverty into the middle class.
So what is the alternative? I mean,
I am not an economist. I can only say that very soon we will need to have more state support for families. That there will be people who are close to
talk about universal basic income.
Absolutely. There is no running away from that. In a country that has a smaller economy than Germany but has more billionaires than Germany, the levels of inequality are so high that we will need to figure out how it is that you send resources away from those who are very wealthy towards those who are not.
And we don't even, I mean, thinking in terms of, taxing some kind of a surcharge on the super rich.
We don't think of taxing the super rich.
Yeah.
We are talking at the moment of removing the word socialism from the preamble. So I think that is the discourse.
And another thing about this present government, especially the Modi government, is its, the foreign relations. And the foreign relations, the Prime Minister has made it as a kind of course, everything he does is that he makes himself as a spectacle. So I think the same thing is being adopted in this foreign relations also.
I come to 𝗧𝗵𝗲's party, and 𝗧𝗵𝗲's a sharp person. He tells me he wants something from me. I don't know what he wants from me. But what he gives me is something what I want. He gives me a red carpet. He makes sure that there is a band of musicians playing. I'm very happy. Foreign policy is about outcomes.
Okay.
What does the country get out of the engagement with another country?
Okay.
Normally, because foreign policy doesn't operate under the same, there are no laws.
Yeah.
You and I are subject to the laws of India. If we do something or don't do something, there are laws. Foreign policy does not operate in that domain. So you have to. It's like gambling. You're trying to figure out what it is that I can get out of one person.
What is the best advantage
what is the advantage I can get out of 𝗧𝗵𝗲? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 thinking what is the best advantage I can get out of Aakar. That is the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
If we look at the visit, the focus of our media and our government is on the ceremony.
Okay.
I went there. They came to me personally. They had a dinner. There was vegetarian food. They gave me a hug. Lots of people were there. All that is fine. That is good. What does the country get out of it? That is outcome. For the US, for Putin, for Xi Jinping, they are very hard people.
Very hardcore.
They are hardcore, and how do you rise in leadership? You rise in leadership because you're able to manipulate other human beings, right? Okay. That's the only way to rise in leadership. Mr. Modi has made it known very obviously that he likes being felicitated. He wants to be seen as this
pampered.
He wants to be pampered. When you do that, he will participate in it. What does the country get out of it? We don't know that. At this point in time, India appears to be part of this anti-China alliance in what is called the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah.
And we have an almost military alliance with the US. But why do we have that? We don't know.
We don't know, yeah.
We don't know why it is that we are moving away from what was called non-alignment. We have no idea. So there are things that are happening at the level of the person which do not reflect necessarily in terms of larger polity or the way that the issues are framed intellectually. But because this is not a subject of popular media debate in the north of India, it's not really meaningful. To my mind, the US visit achieves nothing. Like, what do we get which we didn't have last year? And to answer that, I would say zero. Like, what? I'll give you one example. There's much that is made out of India's participation in what is called the Artemis Accords. That is, the US's desire to send people back to the moon. The US had this program where it was competing with the Soviet Union, which it stopped 50 years ago. In 1973, the last people went to the moon. It's trying to revive that. Fine, let them do that. Why are we getting into it?
Yeah, what is our advantage?
I have no idea. But we have signed on to it without having a discussion in our parliament, without having a discussion in our media about why we should be doing it. But we've gone and signed it nonetheless. And I think a lot of it is in the same fashion. It's like...
And another area during the US visit is this kind of military, defense industries, the American...
I'm telling you something. In 15 years' time, what is the role of fighter jets and fighter jet engines in warfare? And I think most people who are really knowledgeable about war will tell you it will be nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
That within the realm of artificial intelligence, China, when we had a problem with China put a bug in the Bombay electricity supply system and shut it down. And that is what warfare is. You can disable the opponent.
Your communication and other logistical...
You don't need bombs and bullets and that sort of thing. We are still thinking about that.
And I think that they are going to dump the redundant technology back in India and...
Quite possibly they might. It's a good thing that we have told China that we will not be able to accept Huawei and so on, and that's fine. But the difference in technological prowess between China and the US and India is so vast that we need to understand that getting better bombs and better fighter planes is not going to close that gap. That is not where modern military warfare is.
You need the basic thing is the chip, and where we don't have...
You need a platform. You need to be able to control that platform, which we don't have the capacity to do. We don't make that chip. We'll never be able to... And the government is trying to establish some kind of semiconductor industry. It's too late. I'm saying that the fact is that the consumer of the semiconductor is the private sector, and they will go after what is cheapest, what is best, and what is... we don't...
And in fact, I have read somewhere that, our first attempt to get into the semiconductor
was in the 80s.
80s, and we still don't know our semiconductor factory in Haryana that blew up.
The one that, we don't know how that blew up.
It's a mysterious fire.
Yes. And I'm saying that that's our last experience with this technology. Even the US really struggles, Europe really struggles to be able to do what Taiwan does.
Yeah.
Should we be getting into something which is this capital intensive when you have 60% of the people dependent on grain? I don't know. But it is this mad that the discourse in India is this removed from reality, that we should be doing this.
So can we just say that, the last 9 years, what the government has done is that high-pitched militarism and then portraying a major section of the Indian citizens as enemies, minorities, and then, of course, a very well-organized propaganda system with the connivance of the media.
That's a very good summary of what we have done. The really strange thing about part 3 of what you said is that the government money going into mainstream media advertising has actually dropped in the last 3 years, that it has come down to almost nothing. But because society in the north of India has become so polarized, has become so majoritarian, the media by default wants to do the kind of mischief that it has been doing. That progressive, scientific, economically forward-thinking material no longer appears in that media anymore. That their debates are entirely about who spat on whom and who did something yesterday. Whereas for a country of 1.4 billion, which thinks of itself as being a 4,000-year-old civilization, it is not reflected in the mainstream dialogue that people are having in the media, which is very sad. But to the first 2 points, absolutely true. It is this idea of this muscular, militant state, muscular and militant only with some people and not with others.
Yeah.
And the idea that there is an internal enemy that we need to fix, that is the basis and the core of what the BJP is.
And from here, how the country can extricate? Do you see any possibility of this opposition making a move or any electoral?
I think there are very big challenges in front of us which are unrelated to government, which are sort of related to climate change, sort of employment, and so on, artificial intelligence. Having said that, because we are a democracy, it is relatively easy to overturn something that is totally wrong, as we did during 77, 79, and then we were able to undo what it is that was done in 77, and then we were able to undo again what was done wrong in 79. So there's a chance. But I think that more attention needs to be paid to that part of India which is at the moment doing things right, but is not recognized for that fact.
Okay.
And I would definitely say that Tamil Nadu, Kerala would represent that kind of polity where not all of India is doing something totally wrong. And I'm not talking about party or whatever else. I'm saying generally speaking in terms of women's empowerment, in terms of the economy, in terms of education, in terms of health and so on. They're doing something right which the rest of us needs to learn from. But we are not learning from them. We are trying to impose our own ideas on them. We're trying to impose other things on them, including greater power to the north in terms of seats and so on, which we need to rethink and we need to reverse.
And the last thing is that how come a Gujarati with a family business in textile came to the media and journalism and writing and human rights?
Journalism is the one part of the modern economy, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, where you need to have no qualifications to join.
Okay.
So I was lucky in that way. But I think the more you learn about India, the more you experience places like Cochin, the more you experience places like Madurai,
Wow.
you learn that India is not, not just North India. It's not just this kind of capital-minded, kind of business-minded place, which is very caste-oriented in the way that the economy flows. And I think it's been a learning experience for me and for many people like me to be able to know that we are these people.
Expanding the horizon.
Absolutely, it's the perfect phrase. I'm saying that for a Gujarati to come to the south and let go of diet, you could be a Gujarati and come to and eat and bring your food and not not actually engage with the people or the state. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying we were here because of Sainath, and Sainath was describing what it is that his experience was in terms of women's empowerment in the south, how it worked, and how it was not possible to do this in the north. And I think these are the things that you need to examine and learn. For me, as somebody from Surat, it has been a learning experience, a humbling experience to engage with people from the south and recognize that these people have something superior to what I had to offer. And these have something that I should learn from more than something that I should teach.
And on a personal level, and I know that you're being prevented from going abroad from the airport, is there a still kind of a personal level attack apart from the Amnesty International?
No, I have one in court and I have the right to travel abroad. It's difficult because there's a lot of conditions.
Okay.
But that is part of the game. I'm saying that in India, our aim should be to have a democracy where people have equal opportunity, where the state takes care of the weak, where we are agreed on the fact that the pathway to development includes those people who are the poorest. And also importantly, I think we need to understand that the law should be soft on people who are vulnerable, and B, should not insist on people putting people in jail before they are convicted. And as long as all of these conditions are met, I think most of us will be happy to be able to subject ourselves and submit ourselves to whatever process there is. At the moment, that is not happening, but hopefully in the near future, that will happen.
Thank you very much, Aakar,
Thank
for
you, Siddharth.
spending so much time with us. Thank you very much. It's a very, I mean, I hope that you will have more opportunities in the future to have
I hope so
discussions.
too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.